Hi everybody, it's Romania Black. No big deal. We're just on episode 62 of Monster. Getting down to the wire, aren't we? We're like entering like final core levels of being nearly done, and that's terrifying. So yeah, I don't have a lot of comments on here for this episode. I mainly have one that was brought up. Let me find it here. That was brought up for this episode by it's what does it say? It's Wally Cooney or Wally Cutie. Whatever your name is on YouTube, thank you for this comment. It's Wally basically talking about a comparison with episode 59, which I thought was really cool, and that's the idea that we have Martin saying, "I must not look at the devil, I must not look at him," and that being Johan. And they were commenting that way back at the beginning of the series, like episode 3, episode 4, that Junkers told Tenma, he's like, whatever you do, don't look at him. Don't look at the devil. And I thought that was really interesting because the crazy thing is that you have Junkers and Martin who are like, don't look at him. And they have to tell themselves that. Well, they both die. Oddly enough, although Martin was not directly by Johan's hands. He was by the people associated with his followers. But then you have Tenma and Eva who have looked at the devil, and Eva has acknowledged that it's made her a devil, but Tenma kind of believes that even though he's not said it, so it's like, what do we do with that? Like, are Tenma and Eva devils now, even though Tenma hasn't killed anybody yet? Eva believes she's a devil, so it's like, which Eva's not killed anybody either. So you have this very interesting situation where you have Junkers and you have Martin, two people who have technically, as far as we know, Martin has killed people. Junkers, we don't know for sure, but they are people that were avidly trying to not look at the devil. They end up dying. And then you have Tenma and Eva who have looked at the devil. And neither of them have killed anybody yet, but they're both attempting to kill the devil and saying that they're going to become one because of it. So it's just like... And then you have Grimmer, who has technically looked at the devil too, but Grimmer has killed people, so he's kind of a special case, I guess. But yeah, I don't know what to expect out of this episode. I'm pretty excited for it, but I have no idea what to expect or what it's going to give us at this point. When we last left off, Nina had seemingly figured out her memories and got them sorted out. Good for her, although it means she's left Reichwein and Dieter, and now she's going off to supposedly stop Johan too. So it's like, what do we... And she's looked at the devil the most. So it's like, what do we do with that? But at this point, Monster is setting up, seemingly bringing Tenma, Eva, and Nina to Johan. Lunge's off on vacation somewhere. We don't know what he's doing. And then Sook and Verdeman are working together trying to figure stuff out. Reichwein and Rudy are working together trying to figure stuff out with Carl and Lottie. It's like all the parties have gathered, and it's like, well, what do we do now? And Bonaparte, is he alive? Is he dead? I don't know. Although I keep telling myself, Tenma, I hope we see Tenma interact with that redheaded creepy man, because I want to see some resolution with that, or know if Johan killed him or not. Need resolution with that, so what do we do? But it's all coming together slowly but surely, but knowing that it's Monster, there's going to be 1,000 side plot lines, 1,000 surprises along the way, and I'm honestly ready for them. So yeah. I don't have much else to say except to thank Patreon and the philanthropy tier one more time for 2023 before we go into 2024, to thank them for their patronage and for supporting me and my endeavors with this series, because it's been 62 weeks now. Haha! It's been a long time coming. So thank you, Alex Cornejo. Thank you, Anime Annie. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Be Happy, our moderator. Thank you to Dana. Thank you to Destiny Marie. Thank you to Edgar. Thank you to Eric, to Kiri, to Matthew Palfinier, to Nameless Monster, to Shimoyama, to Sunspots, to Trails, to Translucent Men, to Tyrone, to Lyndon, to Jimmy Lujan, to AkuQ, to Loishaji, and Danger Zone. Also, thank you all on the Discord. There was a piece of fan art shared earlier this week that had me like up all morning in a tizzy, and it was just a picture of Grimmer next to Tenma because shipping. But there was I'm very hyper vigilant, and when I see fan art, I like scan every bit of it because that's just, I want to appreciate it. And there was a shot of Grimmer, and his shirt was like ridden up, and there was like a scar there, and I'm like, of course, my brain goes into hyperactive overdrive. That's just how it does. And I was like, well, why does he have that scar? I was like, when did he get that scar? I'm like, has he always had that scar? Is this spoiling me that he's gonna like confront Johan and get stabbed by Johan or shot by Johan? Is this an alternate universe where he dies in the regular universe, but then Tenma saves him and that's why they're together in this? What is happening? And I was starting to kind of spiral a little bit. And I was really upset by it. And then finally I calmed down and was like, what am I doing? So I think that it's just best if I'm only on the Monster Channel, like, when the moderators are there so they can see stuff and be like, Romania, cool your tits. It's fine. But I do apologize to those that were like, what is happening with you? Because that's just how my mind works. And I'm like, I've watched this show week to week for 62 weeks and have avoided as many spoilers as I can. And I'm so close, y'all. I'm so close to the end. Just let me make it. And I'm just, that's how I am. I'm just like so hyper vigilant at this point, but I'm sure it'll be fine. So I'm going to throw this, hope my dog goes and lays down. Please lay down. But we'll see what happens. But I am excited, y'all. I hope you all are too. Let's just see what fresh fun this episode has to give us. So we're going to start Monster episode 62. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. I was honestly about to cry at the end of this episode. And how do we get introduced to one character for one episode, Urasawa? One episode! One character, one episode, and he has such an impact. It broke my heart. It broke my heart. But, this episode was really, really good. I feel like this is maybe one of those episodes that a lot of people might forget about because it's just like, it seems like such an in-between episode. It seems like such a setup episode to be like, oh, well, here's what happened to Tenma, this random thing, and he's off to find this random person. But I feel like it's like the world, the universe is trying to tell Tenma, don't go kill Johan. It's not gonna end well. I feel like this episode is literally the universe trying to tell Tenma, don't do it. Do you not see what's gonna happen? Like, this is beyond just Johan at this point. And I'm like, ugh. So, God, this episode was really good. I wonder if it's one of people's favorite episodes or if it's one that people just overlook or they're like, it's just a random episode. This episode has a lot of thematic stuff in it that I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And Milan, he was there for like a hot second and then he's dead and it's like, shit. He done goofed. He should have just gotten closer if he was going to do that. Why he took off running and didn't get closer to Peter, I don't know. But, you know, in the moment, if you're thinking about doing that, you know, how do you even plan it? I don't know what that would be like. Don't know what that's like. Don't know. But that, So, I guess we ought to talk about this episode and just go through it and examine it. But, so, I am a little bit disappointed that we didn't get that little Opie Mother Trucker. And is he dead? That's the thing. Like, so at this point, our big question is, at this point, here's our question, right? So going back to Martin's whole escapade, Martin believed that Johan, or rather, we the audience believed that Martin believed that Johan was the devil that the redhead was waiting on. That's what we thought. However, after watching this episode, I think what it really was that the redhead was waiting on Peter to come back. Peter was the devil, as we see from Milan. So it was Peter that was the devil that the redhead was waiting on, right? Who is also simultaneously working with Baby and the extremist group, right? Who would really like for Johan to be their leader, right? That's kind of what it is. So it's a nice little kind of subversion because we, the audience, going into this episode, believed that Johan was the one that the redhead was waiting on. But we know now that it's Peter because that's who Tenma was going after. Tenma is trying to, and Tenma, we'll do a little thing here. Tenma is trying to just gather info about Johan from Peter, right? And then that's how he ends up meeting Milan. So that's such an interesting thing because, yeah, I really thought that it was Johan in the hotel room that we were waiting on. But now it seems that Johan, he could have killed the redhead. He could have killed him. He could have gone to that meeting in that hotel room and hacked off the redhead and got him out of the way because Peter doesn't seem concerned about it. Peter's not making a big deal about it. Baby's not making a big deal about it. The redhead's not with them. And Johan's gone. So, and we think that Johan's off heading to Munich. So, it could very well be that Johan came to the hotel room looking for Peter, looking for him, found the redhead. The redhead probably said something he shouldn't have. Johan axed him and then left. And Peter and them discovered the redhead was dead and was like, well, what do we do? And they just moved on. So, but I don't know, right? If we see the redhead again, we'll know that's not the case. But I'm so curious now because you would think if they had met Johan in the hotel room, then they wouldn't made a big deal about him going to Munich and still be looking for him, right? They're still looking for him and they know he's in another hotel. So that leads me to believe that Johan is still working behind the scenes. So there's that, which we'll talk about, but that's so fascinating, right? That we think that, oh, this is making it so much more complicated. Making it so much more complicated, right? So yes. So what's fascinating about all of this is one, that, yeah, we have this idea that it's getting real complicated up in here, right? Tenma believes that Johan is the devil and that he believes that Johan is trying to be manipulated by Peter and Baby, right? That is where we're at. And he believes that the only logical conclusion is that Tenma needs to kill Johan to stop the process. That's what he believes. He believes if I kill Johan, it will stop this whole thing. He won't be manipulated by Peter the Baby. The extremist group's actions will be stopped. If I kill Johan, all of this will be solved. And also it will atone for his sin of saving him. That is where Tenma is at. Right? That is where Tenma is at. That's the conclusion he has come to. Now, we have Johan as a person who, is Johan the devil? That's the question. What is Johan? That's kind of where we're at now because he seems to be wanting to erase his existence piece by piece, but he has to be the last to go. I feel that Johan believes he will die by probably Tenma's hands. That's what he's told the kids, right? Believes he will die. However, here's the question. Is he trying to destroy the system? Which is, I'm going to put a little note here, which is what Grimmer would want. Grimmer wants the system destroyed, just like Tenma. We'll talk about that in here in a hot second. Is he trying to destroy the system? Is he aware he is a part and a player of the system? We're going to talk about that as well here in a little bit. But yeah, so we're going to talk about that. That I think that Johan in some ways is trying to... I think that Johan also wants to kill Bonaparte. If he's still alive, he wants to kill Bonaparte, who is his dad. He wants to get rid of him and thus stop the system, which we'll put down here. Okay, cool. Then you have Eva and Nina, Eva and Nina, who are both out to either kill or confront Johann. For Eva, it's for revenge. And for Nina, it's kind of similar to Tenma. Similar to Tenma, but also, yeah, it's similar to Tenma. She feels some guilt too, and I think she also wants answers, and she's also not sure what's going to happen, but she's also trying to save Tenma. So it's all kinds of complicated, right? And then Grimmer just wants to stop the system. I was getting a little bit more hopeful for Tenma in this episode because it seemed like maybe he was acknowledging that the system is the problem. It's not necessarily Johann. But then Milan brings up the idea that we're after the same thing, you and I, and we're going to talk about that because that was like a big thing. But I'm amazed that, one, Baby did not recognize him because you would think Baby would remember Tenma, but they weren't really watching. And two, the idea of the police showing up. At first, I was like, the police showing up, I was like, oh my God, did the Baby and them just get Tenma to come out of the woodworks because they know the police were going to show up? But Milan believes that it was because they were suspecting that Milan was going to target him. So that's also really frustrating because with Milan and Tenma, I guess we need to put over here, up here the similarities with them. So we have Milan versus Tenma. And I guess the similarities between the two is that both are being tracked and targeted. Milan notes that he's being tracked, and so he's tried to like hide his steps. Tenma, I don't know why Tenma's out in the open anymore. I don't know why Tenma is anywhere out in the open. He is clearly a wanted man, and people know his face. He has a reputation. Again, we talk about the idea of a name. Tenma has a name associated with him. Some people, again, we talk about, you have the idea of, are you an angel or a devil? Tenma and Johann are kind of in the situation where they are both. Some people are viewing Johann as this angel that's going to like unite this organization and they're just this wonderful person. And other people know that he's a devil. What is it? Is it neither? Is it both? And then Tenma, it's the same thing. People are either acknowledging him as a doctor that's a savior or they're acknowledging him as a wanted serial killer. So it's like, is it both? Is it neither? It's just, it's so crazy. But both of them are being tracked or targeted. So I'm like, Tenma, why are you out in the open? That is what are you doing? You are gambling a lot, sir, constantly. Like, Nina can get away with it because Nina's not targeted for anything. And Grimmer is hiding. You don't see him because he's smart. Damn it. I'm like, Tenma wears me out sometimes and how he's just like, I don't know why. And plus, it's not just the fact that he's a wanted man, but he's literally a Japanese man wandering around the middle of Germany. He's a bit conspicuous. I'm like, Tenma, stop. Like, Grimmer can get away with it because he's a tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed man that looks like half the population. You are not. Ah! Tenma, I swear. I was honestly amazed that he had a stroke of luck getting hit by the car because he manages to outrun the police and then gets hit. He is lucky for a lot of reasons. One, he is lucky because it was a hit and run. The guy did not stick around to press charges because that would have been really bad. He's lucky on that front. And he's also lucky that he just happens to run into the guy that is targeting Peter. Stroke of genius. This dentist just happened to recognize him and knew. And the moment that the guy said he recognized him, I was like, oh, he knows him from the fire. He knows. The moment he brought up the fire and knew Tenma, I was like, he knows exactly who Tenma is. He recognized him and was like, And it makes sense why he would take him in because his house is just filled with all of these victims from the actions of Peter and Bonaparte and Baby. So a pleasant dinner table. Oh my God. When this episode first started, I was like, oh, this is just going to be a setup episode and in between episode. This is like hammering home, like, Tenma, are you sure you want to do this? Because you're probably going to die if you go through with this. And is it worth it? And he just told Milan it wasn't worth it. So I really liked Milan's character. He doesn't have like the warm fuzzies around him like Grimmer, or like he doesn't have the warm fuzzies like Grimmer, and he doesn't have like this like kind of mysteriousness about him like Martin did, but he's a very intriguing character because he's just so straightforward and he has a kind heart, but he's just become this monster. But cheat roll credits because of his like seeking revenge and having this like house of all these victims. It's crazy. It reminded me a lot of Hugo. Haven't thought about Hugo since like episode 9. It reminded me a lot of Hugo too, with the little girl that he took in, but he took her in because of guilt. Here, it's like they're all like commiserating together and living in this situation where they're all the remnants of Baby and his organization and what's been left behind. And it's like they all, whether or not they all have survivor's guilt is not, spoken, but they're all kind of the remnants of what's been left behind by this organization. And Tenma is a lucky man to only have a sprain and for this guy that's a dentist to do like some basic, but I like that it's very in character and it's a nice little plot development that Urasawa makes it known that Milan is good with his hands. He's a dentist. He can do little finite things. It makes it much more plausible that he was able to help Tenma get like his ankle set and stuff because he has that kind of ability. I think that's really smart. That's clever. And then of course it was a hit and run. How you do. Which again ties to the fact that, oh, well, Tenma was just a foreigner in this situation. The guy wasn't going to pay attention to him. Tenma was nobody and just went on, right? And of course, Tenma immediately feels guilty, like he's caused all this trouble. And Milan's like, yeah, well, nobody's going to come around here. It's all this interesting, like, sum of different parts. Like, they're talking about this Turkish neighborhood that's getting, like, torn down and it's regentrification. They're, like, trying to gentrify the area and push the immigrants out. And so that's to their advantage in this episode because they can hide out there and nobody cares. Nobody's going to go over there. Peter's not going to bother himself going to the foreign part of town. That kind of works to their advantage here. It also made me be a little bit at ease, oddly enough, because like when the kids were at the window, there was a part of me that's like, you're going to get sniped because that's what we've been dealing with this whole series. But then you think, no, they're not, because people don't care about this part of this section of the city, which is fascinating to like see that kind of thematic stuff be used as part of the plot. When the theme becomes utilized by the plot, that's really good. But yeah, and just calling back to that damn fire, I never thought that would be brought up again, but it is. It's so interesting that we're back in the city where the series started, and so all these things that happened, months ago are now shown to have an impact later on. But it's crazy. And yeah, the bar is gone. The bar where they all met at with the rug and all that debate. Remember, we were such simple times back then. And he's like, yeah, I know about the neighborhood. And this idea that food tastes better with company. I feel like for me, when Tenma, he was arguing that they are the same. They are both driven. They're both driven to kill this one person. And that one person they have guilt about saving, quote unquote, and they feel partially responsible. They feel partially responsible for their sins, right? I think the big difference for me that I could see and what I thought Tenma was kind of processing was that Milan has a family. He has a family that he has structured, right? But the thing about it is, the thing that Milan couldn't say back to Tenma because he wouldn't know is that Tenma kind of has the same thing, right? You have this family of survivors from the actions of Peter and Bonaparte, and then Tenma kind of has the same thing. He has Dieter, he has Nina, he has Rudy, who's not necessarily a victim of Peter and Bonaparte, but he's interacted with people that were part of it. He has Reichwein, who definitely is a victim of that because he was targeted with the whole Richard thing. He knows them. Like, Tenma has a small family of his own that he's kind of like cultivated throughout this series. Very similar to Milan. They're not biological, but they're from all these different backgrounds, and they've come together under a like-minded situation and circumstance. And so, but Tenma doesn't realize that. And Eva's part of that. It's like Tenma doesn't realize it, right? He doesn't understand that he kind of has a family too. And he tries to push that onto Milan, being like, well, Milan, you have a family. There's no reason for you to sacrifice yourself. He's like, I don't have that, so I can. And it's like, but Tenma, you do. And you just don't realize it. And Milan doesn't argue that, but he does say, we're the same regardless. We're both going after these ventures that are not going to end well. Like, Milan dies because it's one of those things where he's in over his head. Like, it's not just he's trying to kill one person. That one person has this web of connections that made it impossible for him to do so. And I feel like with Tenma, it's kind of the same thing. Like, yeah, Johan's one person, but there's all these people surrounding him. And it's like Peter was out of reach for Milan once he tried to go after him. And that's exactly what's happening with Johan. So the difference is going to be, is Johan going to Johan, here's the big difference though too. Johan, through multiple times in this series, has literally pointed to Tenma and been like, kill me. Please do. Please shoot me. Please get out of, please just, if you're going to do it, do it. And Tenma's not been able to. Peter's not done that because Peter doesn't want to die. He wants to create this organization and keep this going. Johan, I feel, is just trying to get to the point where he can die and be like, fine, you want to kill me? Let's go. Just, oh my God. There is a little bit, though, about Johan, though. I'm not going to completely let Johan off the hook, and we'll get to it here in a second. But I love the idea of all these people from different cultures coming together and Tenma explaining the idea of what Oyakodon is, where it's the egg and the chicken and the egg, and it's the parent and the child. That's why it's called that. And I love that they all kind of like chuckle at that. And they're like, isn't that so funny? It's something so different. We never thought of it that way. And there's so much you can make out of this scene. Like, Tenma, for the entirety of this series, has not really talked about his Japanese heritage at all, or where he's come from at all. It's brought up in the flashback when he's about to kill Johan and when he's about to snipe him in the library. It's brought up at the very beginning of the series, but he doesn't talk about it. And the more this series goes on, and when we get scenes like this, it makes you wonder if Tenma's like ashamed of his heritage or ashamed of where he's from, or did not have a good experience there. Like, it keeps getting brought up. Like, the fact that his family is not in contact with him at all is suspicious. The fact that he doesn't want to talk about his family or his heritage that much. Like, when Grimmer brings up Japan on the train and the song, Grimmer's like trying to relate to him, being like, hey, I know where you're from. And Tenma's like, yeah, you do. And that's it. Like, I like that it's understated that Urasawa doesn't really go into detail with it. He kind of leaves it up to us, the audience, to determine. But it does seem like Tenma just doesn't really, either he doesn't feel he wants to have a connection with his heritage or his family, or he feels like he doesn't deserve to, since this is the life he's living now, or there's something else there. And I don't know if by the end of the series we'll find out more about that. But this dinner scene was really sad, because there is always in the back of our mind as the audience, we're like, well, Tenma, could you not go home? Now, he wouldn't be able to make it past customs because he's a wanted man. So yeah, he technically can't go home now. He's stuck there. He can't go home. But it would be interesting if we ever got confirmation of if Tenma wanted to or not. If he ever desired to go home to Japan, or if he gave that up a long time ago. I don't know. They kind of talked about it a little bit back when Tenma was being wanted for those crimes. They kind of hinted at it that, his family was kind of cut off from him. But I find it interesting. And this episode's so sad because Tenma doesn't believe he's deserving of having this good meal and this camaraderie and this great moment with this family. He's like, I don't deserve this. He's like, I'm a horrible person going after someone to kill them. I don't deserve to have this great meal. And he's just like, I've not had an experience like this in a long time. And it breaks your heart. And the fact that he was making that meal for that family at the very end, when he hears that Milan is dead, and he just sits there, like when Tenma was like sitting there about to cry over the dinner, that's what got me. I was like, nope, couldn't take it. And the fact that he didn't want them to hear or see, Oh, my heart, it breaks. Because he knows that these kids are going to be without Milan now, who's this big source to him. He knows his family is going to be without Milan. It's like, what are they going to do? Are they going to disband? Are they going to stay together? What's going to happen to them? It's really sad. It's really sad. And you feel for the two kids who, when they say, like, the kids are so perceptive in this. And I love that, too, that Urasawa does not beat around the bush, that children are perceptive. They understand way more than we give them credit for. And it's so heartbreaking that they were like, we know we're never going to leave this country. We know we're never going to go to these places that he talks about. It's such an interesting contrast to, to the escape artist from, was it Gunther? A few episodes back, the one that was constantly trying to escape. I think his name was Gunther. It's such an interesting contrast to him because he grew up wanting to escape to another country, and his whole like life motif was, I'm going to keep trying to escape no matter what. I'm not going to give up. So this idea of not giving up, right? I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep trying to escape. I'm going to keep trying to get out of here. And the kids are kind of like opposite of him in this episode. They seem very realist. They're like, we know that a group of us could never be on a train without looking suspicious, and they'd never let us out of the border together, so that's not going to happen. And Tenma keeps telling them, well, don't give up. Keep trying, and eventually you'll get there. And it's so sad because it's like Tenma, his whole thing is giving these kids like Dieter and these two like hope that there's like a better future ahead of them. But then he twists that not giving up metaphor to be like, I'm not going to give up until I kill this man and become a devil. And you're like, no, Tenma, shouldn't you be not giving up on saving people and doing that instead? Like Grimmer was trying to tell you. It's so crazy and complex and really well written, but it just breaks your heart, right? It just breaks your heart. And then the moment Tenma sees like the pictures of Peter and the dresser and everything, and he's like, oh my God, what house am I in? I'm glad this didn't turn out to be like a creepy stalkerish thing, because it is, but I'm glad that it turned out to be like that Milan wasn't like going to try to hurt Tenma, because that's for a second where I thought we were going, that he was going to try to turn. For a second, I thought the pictures of Peter on the wall were like, you know, like a fanboy, like praising Peter, and that he was going to turn Tenma in. And I was like, we just got this nice family scene. I'm already sad enough. What we doing? But that wasn't the case, thankfully, right? And then he said he's going to kill Peter. And so, yeah, again, the motif of not giving up and Milan promising them that we'll go farther than the rooftops. The only thing that I hope is that the only thing I hope after this, and I don't know if next episode we'll see the aftermath of Milan's death or not, or if we'll see Tenma leaving. The only thing I hope is that those kids don't give up and that they keep trying to do what Milan was telling them, to keep pushing further. And I can only hope that they take what Tenma has taught them to not give up as a positive thing, and that they keep trying to do good and not give up on it. That's what I hope. But, oh my God. Like, I really like that this episode talks about influence and the effect that people have on each other, and that even like the smallest influence makes the biggest difference. Because that's like a major theme in this series, is that even little tiny influences, they start to snowball and add up over time, for better or for worse. And so I really like that this series spends this episode touching on that. Oh my God. But then Milan, his entire connection to all this, the fact that Milan was childhood friends with Peter, the fact that he influenced him to come to the country, the fact that Peter eventually started these seminars that like brainwashed his son, and his son committed suicide because of it, and now it drove him to revenge. Oh my God, like Milan had a big heavy hand in all this. But what's really sad is the idea that they went from childhood friends. But then it's like Milan, his position got him away from the darkness. Because they both seem kind of similar. Like, I think it was a little bit of a red flag when Peter as a kid was like, I want to see what's beyond someone's worthlessness. And I'm like, that's a really strange thing for a child to say. Right? But it's like he got away from the darkness and was able to help people. And then you have Peter, who I'm presuming met Bonaparte. And Bonaparte, who is the devil, I believe in all of this. Yeah, that he met him and he went into the darkness. And then in that darkness, he started trying to spread it to these children with these seminars. And that led him to Milan's son. And that led him to revenge. So it's this horrible cycle. It's terrifying. It's also very terrifying to think that not only has there been Kinderheim, but there's also been like the seminars that Bonaparte was doing, that other people are doing them too. Like Peter holding the seminars as well. That's terrifying. And it getting brought up. I was wondering if Tenma was going to make the connection to Kinderheim in this episode, but it doesn't necessarily seem like that's the case. But the reaction of these kids beginning to change, that they began to commit suicide one after the other, and they were violent in the massacre, that's all Kinderheim. That's like, that brought me back to the massacre with Johann, where Johann was sitting up there watching the other kids kill each other. That seems to be the case. The thing that's so frustrating about this part of the episode, and about Johann in general, the thing that's so frustrating is that Johann, on the one hand, with the kids all killing each other, we've believed this entire time that it was Johann orchestrating it at Kinderheim and having them all kill each other. And maybe it was. Was it Johann orchestrating it all? Or was Johann just sitting back and not becoming part of it, like he was resisting the urge to become a part of the system? Was it that? You could kind of question it either way now. Was Johann trying to be above the system, or was he in control of the system? That's the question. We don't know the answer. But the part that's frustrating for me about Johann is these last several episodes have really humanized Johann and made us kind of think as the audience, okay, is it Bonaparte that's kind of the overarching evil and not Johann? Is Johann just a cog in the system that's trying to overcome that and break away from the system? But the only way he knows how to do that is to destroy the system. And so you kind of feel empathetic for him, and you're like, oh, well, I feel for Johann. I feel like he's maybe being this anti-hero, you know, one of those situations. But then you think back to Milosh, and you're like, but Johann made this little kid go into the red light district to corrupt him about the injustices of the world that a little kid like that shouldn't have seen. And you feel like, well, damn it, Johann, that was a dick move. Why'd you do that? And then you think back to Johann, like, indoctrinating the children, telling them they should all play chicken on the rooftops and kill each other, just like what Peter's doing. So there's a part of you that's like, but Johann, why were you doing that? If you don't like the system and you're trying to dismantle it, why were you actively being a part of it by telling these kids these things and encouraging them to do the same thing that Peter and them were encouraging them to? And then you have to ask, well, did Johann even realize he was doing that? Was he doing it without realizing it? And then once he realized it, he was like, shit, I goofed and whatever. But then there's the whole library scene of Kim trying to kill Schubert. And it's like, but... So it's like, on the one hand, you want to feel empathy towards Johann as a person. And you want to kind of hope in your heart of hearts that Johann is maybe trying to do what Grimmer wants and dismantle the system. And this is his way of going about it. But then you think of all the shit Johann's done and has influenced. And you're like, but which is it? And so it's so frustrating. And because we don't spend a lot of time with Johann, we as the audience right now can't know what it is. If it's one or the other, if it's both. Does he have a split personality? Does he get, like, did the book trigger him to become a different person? Does he get triggered at certain times to become like this evil version of himself? You know, that's all up in the air, and it's so damn frustrating. Right? But yeah, this whole part here, the facility he was being kept at, he said to me, I want to go back to the seminar. Like, his son told him he wanted to go back to see Peter, and then he committed suicide. And you can tell that Milan is horribly affected by his son's death. And he's like, this man that I thought I knew, that we were childhood friends, he's become a different person than what I knew as children. And the thing about it is, it reminds me of Attack on Titan in a way, is that maybe Peter was like this all along, and he just needed to meet the wrong person to, like, influence him to, like, go full on into the darkness. And that darkness was always there to start with. But the thing about it is, too, is that Milan kind of shows that we all have this darkness in us. It's just whether we embrace it or not. And Peter has embraced the darkness. He full frontal wants to like become enveloped in it. And Milan just tiptoes enough into the darkness and gets sucked in and can't escape. And then he dies. So it's like, Tenma, we as the audience are begging you. That doctor back several episodes ago, she was like, please don't stay in the darkness. And we, the audience, are like, please don't stay in the darkness. We just saw what happened to Milan. We really don't want that to happen to you. But I'm terrified it's going to happen now. I'm terrified that Johan, even if Johan doesn't kill Tenma, I'm terrified Tenma's going to die. Because he is not paying mind to what happened to Milan, and he's going to keep going even though like the signs are there, please don't do this. You're going to end up like him, and it's frustrating. At this point in the series, I don't know how Tenma's going to live. I don't know how that's possible. I don't know how either him or Johan are going to live. I feel like they're both going to die. But I don't know. And if Tenma does live, then what do we do with that? Is Tenma going to kill Johan in the end, or is he going to let him go? I don't know. And so he talks about how the people assembled a vigilante force against Peter and them, but 5 of the leaders mysteriously died. And we see them, and it's like it was Suleiman's son, it was Tung's father, Min's husband, Mustafa's son, and Shmel's father. So it's like the kids' fathers, the one woman's husband, the one old woman's son, and the other older man's son. Like, they all are the remnants of that. I mean, there's lots of red flags saying that if you go against this clearly organized, dark organization and your shit's not together, you're gonna die. Like, that is clearly the red flag that is being sent in this episode. And us, the audience, are like, oh my God, but Tenma's still gonna go through with it, right? So we think. If Tenma's not going to go through it after this episode, then he's at least going to get drug into it because Eva and Nina are going through with it. That's the thing. If Tenma, after this episode, realizes that, you know, I tried to stop Milan from doing this, and Milan told me that I was the same as him. I am the same as him. If I try to go through with this, am I going to die? Am I okay with that? I feel like Tenma's okay with it because he doesn't think he has a family to go back to, unlike Milan. And now I feel like Milan's death might spur him forwards to make him even more motivated. But another part of me, like, is Tenma going to think, okay, this is a bad decision. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe I should reconsider. But then he's going to find out that Eva and Nina are involved. And he's like, well, shit, I've got to save them. So now I have to get back involved. It's just, can Grimmer be a deus ex machina and come in and save them all? I don't know. I don't know. My heart of hearts, I want Tenma to live. I want Grimmer to live. I want everybody else to live. I even don't mind if Johan lives. At this point, I'm like, why are all these people keep dying? I don't like it. But yeah, just the idea of not giving up. And then the whole confrontation with the gun scene was just incredible. Like, that whole conversation about the gun. And I love the idea that Milan's like, look, because I was wondering, I'm like, where did Tenma's gun go to? And the idea was that Milan took it, but he's like, I'm not familiar with this gun, so you take it and I'll take what I'm familiar with. Didn't help him in the long run. And it's so good, I think, for Tenma to see somebody that tells him, you and I are the same. We're after the same thing. We both feel the same type of guilt for one another for letting this evil live. Don't you see? Regardless of if I have a family or not, we both feel the same way about this situation. And just Tenma, the look on Tenma's face that he gives him, ugh. And what I love about this series that's so heartbreaking is that Urasawa, they give us these shots of like Peter and Milan as children and seeing how innocent they were, self-aware, because they talk about the one guy being an alcoholic in the town, and they're like, you can't really listen to what he says. Like, they're self-aware kids, but there's an innocence about them. And then you see them as adults, and the dining room scene where they're eating together as adults, and just seeing how their demeanor has changed, how their attitudes have changed, how their conversation has changed from when they were kids, and like the bright hopefulness they had as children to like the more realistic adult version, it's heartbreaking and it's like so relatable that it's so really well done. And Urasawa kind of excels at that in a series like this. It's just it makes me want to cry. It's just so sad. Makes me want to cry. But then yeah, he sees him again, invites him, you know, in Prague in 1969, and that's about the time that he would have met Bonaparte. They don't say it's Bonaparte, but it is. It is, because they're talking about the darkness and everything. I feel for Tenma, and I love how we talk about shadows and light. The whole time, Milan is in the shadows as he's talking to Tenma. It's just brilliant. This episode's just brilliant. It's really, really sad, though. And then, yeah, they know about Tenma and everything. Ugh. And he's like, if I let him get away, I might not have another chance. And that line there, that's exactly like Tenma saying, if I let him get away, I won't have another chance. They are the same. But I'm like, Tenma, you should know now, seeing that he's going to die, that what you're up against. I'm like, I hate it. And then what he says there, if I was trying to stop you, he's like, thanks for trying to stop me, because if I was in your place, I wouldn't have been able to stop you either. Oh, it's crushing. And then, yeah, he just doesn't get close enough, and it doesn't work out. And then, of course, the moment we go back to the dinner, it's like, yeah, you know that Milan is dead. That moment, though, where he's like, the moment where Tenma is like, he's cooking food, and then like the man was killed, but there were no other fatalities, and he just stops cooking. This episode was hard, y'all. This episode was really, really hard. It was really hard, and there was major concern among the attendees. The attacker's identity and purpose remains unknown. And that's something else, too. When they say his identity and purpose remains unknown, it's the idea of being nameless. That they don't know his identity. They don't know his name. There's so many ties to names in this series, like Tenma's name and how he's become infamous, kind of like Johan as well. And just the idea of names and associations and how they build up our identity and our agency. Just... we've talked about it in this series so much, but this episode kind of brings it all right back to the forefront. And, oh, it's so sad. And then, of course, the amateur footage they do show us, then we see Peter, and of course, damn, you see him go down. You can see in the back shot the image of Milan going down and Peter being dragged away. And that's when Nina recognizes him. What's interesting is her memory at the very end. She thinks, like, that's what's been so confusing this whole time. I'm so glad they correct it now and we see it, is that in every other scene up until this point, the man's had purplish eyes and brunette hair. And I was like, well, that looks like Bonaparte, but Bonaparte's hair part is different, but the hair and eye color is the same, and he doesn't wear glasses. So it's been confusing me this entire series, because the way Nina has been remembering has been seeing Bonaparte's hair, Bonaparte's eyes, but the glasses and face structure of Peter. And now that she sees Peter face to face, and we had last episode where he was like, follow me, and she saw Peter for how he was currently, now the memory corrects itself. And she says, oh wait, no, he's the man. And we see him for he actually is, saying you mustn't hide anything from him. It's like, we have been dealing with all these unreliable narrators this entire time. And I'm like, ah. And so now it's getting corrected. I'm like, oh my God, Urasawa. Oh my God. When we get to this part of the manga, I'm going to be very curious to see if it's going to be in color and if they're going to correct it for us. That's going to be what I want to see. If they're going to correct it and be like, oh my God, no, we've been dealing with Nina's unreliable memory this whole time and now it's coming together. I'm like, So, lots of questions for next episode. What's Eva doing? Where's Johan? Is the redhead still alive? Is Nina, now that she sees Peter, she's going to go after him? What is Tenma going to do? Are we going to get more with Milan's quote unquote family? How are we going to go with this? What's going to happen? I don't know, but I'm really excited to find out. But this episode was really, really good. This was a really good episode. I nearly cried. A character that was on screen for 20 minutes stole my heart and then crushed it. So there's that. And I can't wait to hear your comments down below about this episode. So, in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more Monster. Bye!